Okay, here we're going to be making some ions. Now to make ions in chemistry and therefore find the formula of chemicals and then balance equations, we need to remember the structure of atoms. So if we just have a look here with the very wonky electron shells, I've got the nucleus in the middle, and the nucleus contains protons and electrons. Then we have electron shells, and these are the regions where electrons are found. They're whizzing around the nucleus. And the thing about these is that every shell represents a new row in the periodic table. So if we start with the first row across the top, hydrogen and helium, then this would be the first shell. Then when we go down to the next row, we have to make a new shell. And so lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine and neon, they go into the next shell. Then when we get down to the next one and start look at sodium, magnesium, they go into the third shell. So for every row, you make a new shell. Okay. The other thing to remember here, and of course you're writing these down and pausing them as I do the video. The other thing to remember is that when you get to the noble gases, that means the shell's full and nice and stable. So here we have hydrogen and helium, and that's full. So helium is a noble gas. So that's saying that when you have 2 electrons in the first shell, it's nice and full. Then we get to the second level. Right, let's do the second level now. So hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon. So now with the next noble gas, neon, that's telling us that we have 8 electrons in the outer shell. So therefore that's nice and stable. And when we have 8, we call that an octet. And so most of the time, elements want to form a stable octet. They want to have 8 in the outside shell and therefore be nice and stable. If we keep going to sodium, then we put the next electron in the outer shell, and sodium has 1. It's in group 1. So there's the electron configuration for sodium. Now, instead of drawing them like that all the time, which takes a while, we can do it the shorthand. So we can go, there's 2 in the first shell, there's 8 in the second shell, and then there's 1 in the outside shell. And so we can say that the electron configuration for sodium is 281. Now for sodium, that is a metal, and the thing to remember is that all metals will tend to lose electrons to become stable. So here we have 1 electron in the outer shell. It's going to lose that electron, and when it does so, it'll only have the remaining electrons left, but it becomes stable because of the inner 8 electrons here, right? So for sodium, it forms an ion. So it's got that sodium symbol there. It loses the ion, so let's put an arrow there. So we started off with sodium. The end product is we have a sodium ion. It has a charge of +1 because it's lost an electron. It started off with 11 protons, 11 electrons, both the same. But if you're losing 1 electron, it means now you have 1 extra proton in the nucleus, and so we have a charge of +1. Because it's lost that electron, we write it on the right-hand side. So that is an equation to show the loss of this electron to form a sodium ion. Now it's a positive ion, and positive ions are called cations. Right? And this is the way I like to remember them. A cation has positive big I's. Alright, so cat, ion. So positive ions are cations. So that's forming a positive ions, and all metals will tend to lose electrons to form cations. Okay? And so in the periodic table, when we coloured those up, you remember we probably put circles above the periodic table. Group 1 forms +1 ions. So sodium is in group 1, and so that's telling you that all group 1 elements will lose their outer electron, which we call a valence electron, by the way. So write that down. So that's the outer electron is called a valence electron. And it loses that to form a nice stable ion, a 1+ ion. Alright, so that's the same for all of those. So sodium, potassium, etc., all going down that, cesium, all going down form of +1 ion. Then we get to group 2. Guess what? They have 2 electrons in the electron shell, so Bob's your uncle. They lose 2 electrons and they form 2+ ions. When you get to group 3, yep, they lose 3 electrons and form 3+ ions. So we get this trend happening, which is really easy to remember. Let's look at nonmetals now. So if I was to look at nonmetal, the famous nonmetal that we use with sodium is chlorine. So chlorine has it's in group 7, and it has 17 protons and 17 electrons. So let's just do those. So we have the first 2, the next 8, whoops, and then we have 7 on the outside, right? So let's draw those in. So 2, then we have 8 here, which makes 10, and then we have 7 on the outside, which gives us 17. And so chlorine has the structure 2, 8, 7. So that's the shorthand for chlorine. Now chlorine is a nonmetal, and it gains electrons. So what we said before, all metals lose electrons. Well, here we go. All nonmetals will tend to gain electrons. And if they're gaining electrons, that means they form a negative ion, and we call those anions. Okay, so let's see. So here we have 7 electrons. Altogether we had 17. So 17 protons, 17 electrons. It's gaining an extra electron now. So now it has 8 in the outer shell. It's got a stable octet. So it's nice and stable. So its electron configuration has become 2, 8, and now it's got 8 in the outside. So this is the ion, and this is the neutral atom. So it's gained an extra one, so it forms a -1 charge. Whereas before, sodium had lost 1, and so it formed a +1. So if we were to write an equation for this, it would be, we start off with chlorine. Whoops. Right, we start off with chlorine, and let's put the arrow there, it ended up with a chlorine ion, okay, chlorine ion, -1. But to get that, it needed to get an electron. So we put the electron on the left-hand side, okay. So chlorine atom gets an electron and forms a chloride ion. So that's the formation of ions, and that's true for all of them, okay. So you've probably got a worksheet to have a go at doing and forming ions. But the key things to remember: an ion is an atom with a charge that metals lose electrons to form positive ions called cations. Nonmetals gain electrons to make anions. Okay, you learned about shorthand, dribbling. All right, so that's it about making ions. Do more on the worksheet, and you'll be a master in no time. See you in the next video.